What's up YouTube? Eric Vasquez here from Teach Me to Design. And today I'm so excited because I'm going to be sharing with you some of my favorite techniques for creating custom typography in Adobe Illustrator. Alright, so we're going to jump right into Illustrator where I've got a very basic document just set up with 4 artboards. So to get started, I'm going to zoom in here onto my first artboard, and let's begin with the first sort of custom type technique that I want to share with you. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to do is just pick a font, type out some text here. I'm just using the word Echo for now. And the typeface I'm using is Avenir Black, but you can use anything similar that you have, like Gotham or Helvetica, anything like that. Alright, now I'm going to select my text, hold the Alt, Option, and Shift keys, and drag it down. And then while holding the Alt, Option, and Shift keys still, just reduce the size of it a little bit. Now I'll select both copies, go up to the Object menu, Blend, and choose Blend Options. So here you want to make sure that you have specified steps checked and type in any number. For now I'm just going to use 30 and click OK, and nothing happened. Right, that's because you have to go back to the Object menu and choose Blend, then Make. And now you can see that something is starting to happen, but you can't quite make it out, and that's because we have a solid black fill. But if I press D on the keyboard to go back to my default colors, I now have a white fill with a black stroke, and you can see a little bit better what's happening here. But let's say I want to reverse this so that the echo is sort of starting with the larger type in front. I can do that very easily by going to Object, Blend, Reverse Front to Back. And now you can see we've got a cool echo effect. And the nice thing about this is that I can select it, go back to my Object menu, Blend, choose Blend Options, and I can change the number of steps to, let's say, 10, and it will just automatically update. So it's sort of a nice non-destructive way to create this effect. Or if I wanted to add more steps, I would do the same thing. Just come back and change the value to, let's say, 80. And there you go. Now, one other interesting thing about this is that I can actually come in here and change the word. I can change the top copy of Echo or the bottom copy and change it to anything I want, really. And you'll see that it's now actually sort of morphing between those letters, which is creating kind of a cool looking effect. So using these blend options, you can create some pretty nice looking copy and type depending on what you're going for. Okay, so now let's take a look at the second one. Alright, now here's another technique that I use quite often when working on logos or title treatments in Illustrator. And the first thing I need to do is press Command Option O to convert my text to outlines. And once I've done that, I'll go to the Object menu, choose Path, Offset Path, and let's put in a value of -3 px, press Return, and you can see that we now have a selection inside of our text. So before we do anything, I'm going to press Command X to cut it, Command F to paste in front, and then Command G to group it together. Otherwise, it would have forced me to select each of these letters individually. So now I can press D, then Shift and X, and I've swapped those colors, so I have this nice kind of like inline effect going on. But now, let's say I want to just get rid of the fill color. I'll just turn that off. And if I select my top copy here, I'm just going to lock it for a second by pressing Command and 2 on the keyboard. I'll select my original text, go back to the Object menu and choose Path, Offset Path. This time we'll use a positive value, let's say 6px. Again, press Command X to cut it, Command F to paste in front, Command G to group it, and then I'm going to send it all the way to the back. So go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back, and you can kind of see what's happening here. So let me unlock my text. Okay, which I did by pressing Command Option 2 on the keyboard. And now I can select each of these individually and just kind of play around with them if I want to, so that you can see what kind of effect we're getting here. Alright, so let's change that one to white. Let's change the inside copy to a white fill with a black outline, and that's looking kind of cool. Right, it just allows you to add some nice detail here. So now what I'm going to do is select the whole word and press Command Shift G a couple times to ungroup everything. And now if I select each of the letters individually, I can group each letter with each of the copies that we created. And this will give me more control and allow me to adjust things like the spacing. Okay, so that's a pretty nice effect that I use pretty often as well. Now I want to show you this next one, which I think is kind of a fun one. And it's something that works particularly well for like old-timey or vintage logos. And that is to just use the envelope distort effect. So once you have your type, go to the object menu and choose envelope distort, make with warp. And you get some pretty cool effects here that you can play around with. And you know, my favorite that I tend to use the most is probably arc, or sometimes I will use arc upper, but just go in the reverse direction. Usually I'll set it to horizontal. Vertical doesn't really look that great in my opinion. But I encourage you to play around with these settings because you can get some pretty cool looks here. But as I mentioned, I personally like flag and rise quite a bit, especially for like vintage logos. And the cool thing is you can play around with these sliders. Click OK once you're happy with it. And you'll notice that you have these points in here. So what I can do is press A on the keyboard to get my direct selection tool. I can click and drag around any of these points, and you'll notice that you now have these handles. So you can manipulate the points further, or you can use your arrows to move them up and down, just to sort of, you know, push that effect a little bit further. All right, so that's another nice way to create some custom type in Illustrator. Now, the next one that I'd like to show you works pretty nicely for sports logos and things like that. And maybe even like, you know, music logos if you're doing something for a musician or an artist. And this works pretty well. All you have to do is use the pen tool, and we're just going to create some extra shapes here. So I have a solid black fill selected, and I'm just going to go to the edge of the first letter and add some points here. So if I zoom in, you can see that I can add some points here to my letters, just to give it some more personality, and you just want to make sure that it's, you know, lining up. And this is just a nice way to add some cool custom effects to your text. Right, but let's say, you know, I didn't want to add to the type. What if I wanted to remove shapes from the type? Well, you can do that too. So instead of using a solid black and drawing shapes that are added onto the text, you can use a solid white and kind of cut into the letters, right, like this. I'm just creating points with the pen tool, cutting into my shape, and trying to sort of, you know, have some variation here with the size and the placement of these points. You know, and this creates kind of a nice sort of eroded effect, or gives your logo a little bit more of an edgy personality as well. So whether you're adding to or knocking shapes out of your text, just quickly with the pen tool, you can see that you can get some pretty nice and easy looking results here. It's really not that hard, but it's just more about trying to make them look sort of random. You know, so experiment with the size, the placement, and things like that when you're adding them to your shapes. The biggest thing is to just have fun, right? That's really what we're here for. So you can see how I quickly kind of got a nice looking effect there, and I'm just going to group it all together. And it gives it like a little bit of a eroded sort of effect, which can be kind of cool. But speaking of an eroded effect, let me show you a way that you can add some custom distorted grunge to your type. All right, so what I'm going to do is just create another new layer so I can hide those 4 examples that we just looked at. And I'm going to press B to get my brush tool. And this is a tool that, you know, I haven't used a lot in Illustrator before. But since I started experimenting with it more, I've figured out some pretty cool stuff. And Illustrator actually has some pretty nice brush presets here. So if you go to Window, Brushes, click on the hamburger menu, go to Open Brush Library. I like to use the Artistic Chalk Charcoal Pencil brushes because there's some really nice looking textures here. And I'm just going to select one randomly, Charcoal Rough, let's say, and I'm just going to start to kind of like scribble with my brush tool. Just random shapes, not really making anything in particular. But what I will do is select them, go to my stroke panel here, and if you don't see this, this is also under the window stroke option right there. Let's increase the stroke to about 6 pixels, and maybe 5. Yeah. All right, and then we'll just continue to kind of brush here, and I want to spread some of these marks out. So, you know, move them around so they're not all just clustered in the middle. All right, and then let's just make a few more of these to kind of fill in some of these empty spaces here. And then if I select all of these, I can go to my color, maybe change the color to like a red. That's clashing a little bit with that gray right there, but that's okay. All right, and then what I'm going to do is select a different brush. Maybe, which brush is this? Charcoal Varied. And let's go ahead and use a different color. So instead of red, let's go with like a bluish color, something like this. And I'll just go ahead and start making some more marks here. And again, I can change the size of my stroke. You really just want to have some variation. That's the biggest thing, is to make sure you have variation here. So change it up a few times, you know, create marks just randomly like this. And then what we're going to do is press A to get our direct selection tool, select any of the blue strokes that we just made, go to Select, Same, Fill and Stroke. Okay, and then we're going to go to Object, Expand Appearance. And this is going to change it from a line into a shape, basically. All right, and we want to continue to do this for all of the blue lines that we created. Select Same, Fill and Stroke, go to the Object menu, and then Expand Appearance. Okay, and now we should be able to select all of these blue shapes together. So one more time, press A, select any of the blue, go to Select, Same, Fill and Stroke. And now, looks like we missed one or two of these lines in there, so just expand that appearance. Now what we're going to do is use the Pathfinder tool to merge these shapes together. So click on the Unite option, which is the first one, and that's just going to make it so we now have a solid blue shape here. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing with all of the red. So select the red by using your direct selection tool, go to Select, Same, let's try stroke color this time. And now we'll go to the Object menu, Expand Appearance, and then once again use the Pathfinder to unite all of these shapes. Okay, so now this is where things start to get interesting. I'm going to move these around a little bit, maybe make another copy of all the red here, just to get some like variation happening. Okay, and I'm going to select all of these together, and I'm going to go to the Pathfinder once again and go to Divide. Now it may take a couple of seconds just to do the work, but once you've done that, press A to grab your direct selection tool again, click on any of the blue areas, go to Select, Same Fill Color, and just delete it. All right. Now if I then go to my red and do the same thing, select a portion of it, go to Same Fill Color, delete it, you'll see that I no longer have anything visible. But if I press Command and A, you can see that something is there, right? So these are all the empty, shapes that have been left over. So if I select these, press D on my keyboard, you'll see that I now have some shapes that have been filled. And if I select all of this, and let's just go ahead and make it like solid black, remove the stroke, I've got these sort of grungy shapes left over here. So I'm going to reduce the size of them. Create a copy just by clicking and dragging. Play around with the size and the positioning a little bit just to make something a little more random here. All right, and just create a few copies of it. All right, so you get something like this. I'm going to rotate it. Really just kind of a mess of shapes here. But we're then going to merge them all together with the Pathfinder once again. And this one might take a few seconds just to figure it out. But basically, what we can do now, if we have some type, I'm just going to type out the word grunge, scale it up a bit. We can grab our shape. Now let's make it white. Bring it to the front on top of our text. Okay, and just place it over your text a little bit like this. Okay, maybe make it a little bit larger. All right, and you might be thinking, well, I can't even see this now, right? And you would be right. So what we want to do is probably make it even smaller. Okay, and then just hold Command, Option, and Shift. Sorry, Alt, Option, and Shift to drag another copy over to the side until you've covered up all of your letters. Now, if I select each copy of my grunge texture, not the text, I just want the texture on top. All right, so let me back up here. I'm going to select the text and lock it by pressing Command 2. Select all of my grunge shapes, use the Pathfinder once again to unite them. Okay, and then we're just going to change it to a color. It can really be any color that you want. All right, so let's make it blue. Unlock our text by going Command Option 2 on the keyboard, pressing Command Shift O to change it to outlines. And now we're going to select everything, and we're going to select Merge from the Pathfinder. Now, once we do this, it's essentially going to merge all of the blue shapes with our outlined text. Okay, so here we'll use our direct selection tool again, pressing A on the keyboard, select any of the solid blue, go to Select, Same, Fill and Stroke, and then Command X to cut it or to delete it. Right, and you should just be left with all of these shapes in here. Right, so you'll see that you have some of these extra shapes on the outside. Again, you can't really see them, but they're just empty shapes that are there. But if I click and drag around them with my direct selection tool, I can go to the Select menu and choose Same, Fill and Stroke, cut them, and then come over here, paste them on the canvas or off to the side, and I can now fill that with a solid color as well. Right, so it's a little hard to see because the details are pretty small in here now, right? But I can basically grab all of this, and you've got all these little fine details in here that you can put on top of your text, right? So it creates this really interesting, like, distorted looking type. Now, depending on the size of the grunge texture that you're using and everything like that, you know, it'll be more or less legible, but the real key here is to, you know, just experiment and play around with this until you get something that you like. So for example, I can now sort of recycle this shape by making everything larger, getting rid of some of these bigger areas in here. I can select all of this and ungroup it, and then just delete some of these like larger chunks of color. Right, like that. I want to get rid of that. Anything that basically resembles the letters at this point. And you can see by just like combining these things together, right, you're sort of left with all of these little details, and they're just totally random details. So if you want to, you can select a bunch of these points, stack them on top of each other like this, right, and just play around with that until you start to get a texture here. And really the purpose of using the word grunge is just to help us break up the shapes even more, right? So this is really what we're looking for, is the leftover sort of bits and pieces here that we're going to group together. Okay, so now if I have text, I can use the same word or a different word. Doesn't really matter. Let's try metal. Now I can take this texture, drop it on top of my text, change the fill color to white, and we actually have a much more legible looking lockup here, right? Or text. The text is much more legible, and you can see that we now created this sort of custom grunge and distortion from using our default brushes in Illustrator. So this one does take a little bit more time, and you kind of have to experiment with it a little bit more, but it is worth it because you do get some really cool looking effects. And let's say you are now happy with your text and you want to just merge it all together. I'll create outlines for my text, and then I will grab my grunge texture on top, select them both, go to the Pathfinder menu and choose Merge once again, and now use the direct selection tool to select any area of blue in here, select, Same, Fill and Stroke, and now just cut it, and you're just left with your text basically. Again, if you have any of these leftover shapes, you can select them, go to Select, Same, Fill and Stroke, and delete them, and you should now have transparent text. So for example, if I wanted to put this type on a color background, because we used the Pathfinder before, it should show through. Right? So you can now see it clearly on a background. And now I can just change this type color to white if I want to invert it, or you can really make it any color that you want. Right? So let's say I wanted to change the fill color here to red, and make this yellow background something else. Right? Maybe like a lighter blue. right? You can play around and have fun with it, but the technique itself is pretty straightforward. It's just about kind of knowing the steps and experimenting until you get something that you like. All right, so here I'm just playing around with the type a little bit more, seeing how different colors look. Okay, and we don't want to stroke on it. Something like that. I mean, that's kind of cool. Okay, so between this and the other 4 techniques that I've shown you before, we've looked at a handful of different ways that you can create some really interesting and unique custom type within Adobe Illustrator. So I might do a part 2 of this just because I realize this tutorial is getting a little bit long, where we combine some of these techniques. But really the purpose of it is just to give you a handful of ideas and some interesting ways that you can start to, get in Illustrator, get your hands dirty, and have some fun. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, please go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and be sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thank you so much for watching and for following along today. I'm Eric Vasquez for Teach Me to Design, and we'll see you next time.